Greetings. I'm Evan Swensen. I'm an author and a book publisher. I'm also a member of Author Masterminds, sponsors of Readers and Writers Book Club. Welcome to Readers and Writers Book Club. This is the worldwide online general membership meeting of Readers and Writers Book Club, rapidly becoming the book club destination for all readers of good books. Thanks for being here. Today's membership is represented online by Author Mastermind members and other book club members participating on Facebook Live. I hope you'll find every reader is a friend and every author is approachable. Once again, welcome to Readers and Writers Book Club. Of course, we'll be conversing about books, authors, writing, and the magic and miracle of reading. We'll also discuss the fun of reading competition when we talk about Readers and Writers Book Club's Battle of the Books. And we'll have some fun as we award Readers and Writers Book Club branded door prizes available to all book club members. Okay, let's meet today's co-hosts. We welcome you to this special costume event. The Author Masterminds members are here, many of them, and we're going to have an opportunity to meet them. Actually, going to meet their characters because they're in costume, and so I think you're going to like this. Let's begin today's meeting by meeting. Let's start with Steve Levi. You'll like this costume. You will like them all, but Steve, tell us about your character that you're representing today.
Well, Steve Levi is not here. I am Heinz Noonan, the bearded Holmes and the master of the impossible crime. And you can see I am wearing a duct tape tuxedo because that is the latest book that I had that is out. And I am the master of the impossible crime. And I concentrate on crimes that nobody else thinks are possible, like a Greyhound bus with hostages and $10 million vanishing off the Golden Gate Bridge. And it's a great book, and you should be going to Author Masterminds because we've got a lot of great books on authormasterminds.com.
Steve, tell us more about Heinz Noonan and this duct tape tuxedo that you have.
Well, Heinz Noonan is a master of solving crimes that no one else can figure out how they can do it. Like, for instance, he gets a call that says that somebody is digging in the roof of a church, and he has to figure out why somebody would be digging in the roof of a church. Or, as I said before, is the Greyhound bus that disappears off the Golden Gate Bridge. But the key to understanding Heinz Noonan is all of the evidence, all of the clues that you need in the short stories and the novel are there, and you should be able to figure it out just as fast as the detective. It's more real life because in real life things don't just happen in a straight line. You pick up the clues and try to figure out what's going on along the way.
Thanks, Steve. Let's go to South Africa, where it's tomorrow already. In fact, it's 9 minutes into tomorrow in South Africa. James, let's say you introduce your character from your book.
So today I am Mr. Abner, not James. James is the author, but Mr. Abner is a historian and a character in my first novel, The Unknown of the Known in Africa. So Mr. Abner was a historian from Lesotho, and had taught history for decades, not only in Lesotho, not only in South Africa, but abroad as well. So his philosophy is that if we don't teach history, it might die with us, and that would be disadvantage of to the next generation and generations to come. So history, he says, has painful chapters and also has pleasant chapters, but all in all, they both need to be told without prejudice and without biasness.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Steve or James. Thanks for staying up and being here with us. What that tells us, though, is you're going to be able to celebrate Halloween 12 hours before we are. So
I feel like I'm in America.
yeah. Okay. Let's go to Portland, Texas. Mary Flint. Mary, tell us about your character, please.
My character is Andresha Kanway. She's part of a rebellion on her home planet of Rendaria, and she can seem like a little bit of a rough character at first. She's very tough and determined, but and it's really hard to earn her trust. And she doesn't like to talk about herself very much. But for those she does call her friends, she's fiercely loyal, and she is determined to help those who cannot help themselves fight for their own freedoms.
Okay, thanks, Mary. We'll be talking with you later. I want to know some more about her. Cil, let's go to Talkeetna, Alaska, and meet Cil's character.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rahlys. I am the guardian of the light. Oh, here comes Raven. I guess you've all met Raven. Raven is my familiar, and he's the one that brought the crystal, the article of light to me. Here in the upper Susitna Valley, out in the wilderness, it's already winter up here. It's quiet here because our little woodsy community, we have lost both Eileen and Melinda across the galaxy. They have traveled to Aia, so our little community is very small right now. There's not much going on. I wish Quaylen was here. He made me the garland that I'm wearing today. He's the love of my heart. I wish he would contact me from Aia. And I'm wearing this mask. It's a Mardi Gras mask because my creator, Cil, is from New Orleans, and I'm honoring her tonight. Hello, everyone.
Thanks, Cil. Well, let's go to Valerie. Let's see, Michigan. Valerie, let's meet Remington the Beagle.
My name is Remington Beagle, and I come from a long line of very refined hounds. I graduated from puppy school, and I consider myself an intellectual and a raconteur. My resume includes 2 seasons as a campground host and lynx locator extraordinaire. My pack is human. My mom says, Remington Beagle, you are the cream in my coffee. You are the sprinkles on my cupcake. You are the salt on my chips. I've worked very, very hard in the training of my human pack. It's not easy, and they have to be constantly retrained, but they're worth it. I really am a people person. I love people of all ages and sizes. I like most other dogs. Sometimes the hyper ones get on my nerves, but I really like the little white poodles. Oh la la, oh baby. My best friend is a huge Rottweiler named Rudy. He can be pretty rambunctious, but he has a heart of gold. I love to walk the neighborhood with Rudy. He's well respected, I can tell you that. No other person or dog ever thinks about messing with you when you're with Rudy. He looks intimidating, but there's nothing to fear. He's like a soft, lovable stuffed toy, and he's my best friend. I like to travel and view wild animals. I love to camp. Grandchildren are the best. And sniffing is my hobby. And I have a question for Mr. Stephen Levi. My question is, what do you get when you cross a racing dog with a bumblebee? What do you get when you cross a racing dog with a bumblebee?
A fast flyer, a frequent flyer, a
greyhound buzz.
okay, thank you. Greyhound, okay.
That was great, Valerie. That was great, Remington. Thank you. Mary Ann, Paul, can you top that?
Okay.
I don't know if I can top that, but I'm not Mary Ann.
Do you know why the dog crossed the road twice?
To get to the other side. I don't know.
He was chasing a boomerang.
Cats don't chase boomerangs, do they, Mary Ann?
No, cats don't. That is way, way beyond what a cat would want to do. It is not at all dignified. Anyway, I am BC, which my pet, her name is also Cat, named me Black Cat, and I let her do that. But I own Cat Tovsklosky, who is the heroine of the Iconoclast thriller series, although she thinks she owns me. I was a wild kitten when she took me in, and I am still wild, although I have learned to love the warmth of a house in winter and snuggling with my person at night. I am fiercely loyal. If anyone tries to hurt my cat, I use their legs as a climbing post. Cat says I am cantankerous. I say I don't put up with silliness or disrespect.
You're the cat that Cat owns. The character Cat owns the cat.
Well, I am, but I own her actually.
Yeah. So the cat, C-A-T, owns Cat, K-A-T.
Yes, correct.
Okay, we got that right. Okay. All right. Thanks, Mary Ann.
You're muted, Evan.
Let's see who else we got here. We got Carl. No, this is McGee. Carl McGee. No, tell us who you are, Carl. Step right in here.
Well, you finally got it right. My name is Joseph Patrick Aloysius Michael John McGee. I'm the private investigator to the stars, the billionaires, the makers and shakers in government, and the gang lords, whomever who can pay the freight. And top of the day to you. My office is on Fifth Avenue in the city. My staff is, shall we say, interesting, but whatever, they are effective. How can I be of service to you?
All right, thanks, Carl. Thank you, Mr. McGee. We appreciate that. All right.
You can just call me Joseph Patrick Aloysius Michael John, whatever you'd like.
All right. Well, I'm dressed as a fisherman, I guess, today. My book character is me. At one time, in another life, when I was out publishing the magazine and making TV shows, I would start the day something like this. I'd say I get up and I have the best job in the world. I get up in the morning, I put on my fly vest and pick up my fishing rod, kiss my wife goodbye, tell her I'm going to work, and she believes me. And so I was able to spend a lot of time in the outdoors, but now back publishing and creating author masterminds and operating the Readers and Writers Book Club. So anyway, that's the ones that are here. We expect that there may be other authors that would be arriving, but I know that the authors here have questions of the other authors. And Mary Ann Paul is monitoring the Facebook Live event. And so she may have comments from the Facebook Live event. And if you do, Mary Ann, just jump in and take over and tell us what's going on over there. In the meantime, let's just open it up. Anyone that has questions, comments, or anything of any of the other authors, now's the time to just jump right in.
Yeah, I got a couple of questions, especially to Carl and Mary Ann. I have to really dig for ideas. I mean, I can't just wander down the street and suddenly poof, get an idea. And frankly, Mary Ann, I have a hard time reading your stuff, especially late at night, because it just sends my mind off in areas that I really don't want to go. And Mary Flint, you know, I've taken a look at your stuff and I have no idea where you come up with your ideas. Me, I have to struggle, I have to do research, but do you come up with your ideas do they just arrive? Or how do you get your ideas?
Well, they kind of do just arrive. They steep in my head for a very long time before they're ready. So some of it is research though. Like if I'm coming up with a gadget to give my characters or something, I like to research mechanical stuff to see how that would work in real life and then apply it to my world that I create as well.
I'm in an interview.
Objects are what give me ideas. So they never become part of the real focus of the story, but they're what give me an idea. So Raven's Cove was written because of a really scary tree that I saw in Anchor Point. And Anguis was written because I saw a rock that looked like a skull. And this is how my stories occur. So unless I have an object to focus on, the story doesn't happen. So, but you'll never know it was the thing that was the impetus for the story to be written. It's in there somewhere, but it's sure not a focus of it.
Well, I don't know, because I kind of work it backwards. I'm driving along and I'll look at a landfill and I'm saying, gee, what can I do with a landfill? You know, and then it rolls around and sometimes I got all kinds of ideas of things that could never happen. Every once in a while, a story will pop, but you know, I don't know where you two come up with those kind of ideas. How about you, Carl? Where do you come up with your ideas?
Well, I've always thought in stories. My mother, who loved me, this is a long, long time ago, just after the Civil War. Anyway, I used to come home from school and tell her the stories one day, almost none of which bore out in objective thought. However, she loved the stories, and so I went around always thinking about it. And then as I was going through my preparation in my career, I kind of thought, well, what if I could write a book about that? And the other thing that I did and that I do is I love to read, and I love to read about history. So for example, right now I've been reading about the Dutch in the 17th century because the 17th century belonged to the Dutch. And it just gives me all kinds of inspiration when I find out about their obstetrics or about their religious beliefs or their clothes or their sailing ventures or the Spice Islands or that kind of thing. And then I will sit down and do the simplest of things, which is I put my fingers on the keys and begin to type. And when the computer works, which is about every other Wednesday, out will come a story. And then I do a little correcting. And as you'll note in my comments to y'all, my spelling is not great and my copy reading is worse. But I have a question for you, Steve. I got your piece, wonderful thing about all the really strange stuff that happens in Alaska. Now, I had the temerity to question your sanity, or more accurately, whether or not you'd stop taking your required medicines, or on the other hand, whether it's the remote possibility that some of those things are actually true. Could you fill me in?
You're talking about the stuff that I put in on my uploads.
Yeah,
You know, how many of them are
Yes.
true? Most of them are true. The thing is that there are a lot of things that are true, but nobody would believe them. And so, you know what I mean? And Alaska, we have something that's called absurding, and we're the only place in America that has it. We get so many tourists that come to Alaska and they ask the stupidest questions. And so, you know, I mean, it's just, you know, first of all, Alaskans are very, very polite for about the first 2 weeks. You know, no, we don't have any penguins, and no, we don't have 24 hours of sunlight followed by 24 hours of darkness. I mean, it's 6 months of light followed immediately by 6 months of darkness. So after a while, what we just do is we just start saying, yeah, we got penguins. You know, you can see them out on the park strip. You know, and so what happens is a lot of times Alaskans, you show pictures, like I had a picture of this giant salmon on the back of a truck, and you have no idea how many people actually believe that salmon get that large. You know, and so Alaskans, we don't say, no, that's not true. We say, you know, yeah, sure it is. So, you know, which also makes it hard. I have to be very careful, because when I tell a story, when I lie, when I absurd, I just use my alternate character, who is Warren Sitka. So anytime you see Warren Sitka says something, it's probably a lie. But if I say it and I have it in a history book, it's true. So does that help?
well, I'm familiar with that kind of talk. You know, your stuff is like going to Mexico and getting out someplace and asking some nice person, and there's a lot of nice persons there, how to get from here to some other place. And he will very straight-facedly tell you exactly how to do it. And then the next guy comes up and you ask him, and he gives you the exact opposite description and instructions. And both of them are absolutely sincere. And most of the time I spent in Mexico City lost.
Mm-hmm.
But I enjoy being lost in your stuff.
All right.
Steve, we need to hear about that duct tape tuxedo. How did that idea come
Well,
about?
I keep looking for things that are completely different that I've never seen before, and I had never seen a duct tape tuxedo. I'd seen all kinds of things that they use duct tape on. I saw a guy use duct tape on a plane. A guy out in Talkeetna, and Cil, you probably know him. Doug. What's his name?
Doug Geating.
Doug Geating, right? Doug Geating. I interviewed him for my book on aviation, and he was telling me some of these stories. You have to be very careful about bush pilots, because they will look you in the face and they will lie, and they will tell you horribly lies. So you have to wait. You have to wait until, you know, you got 2 or 3 people. And he says, yeah, he landed out in this landing strip someplace, and one of his tires blew out. And he said, yeah, he said what he did is he had to take off. And so what he did is he took the tire that had blown out, and he filled it full of towels and paper towels and sweatshirts. And then he duct taped the whole thing, and then using the wheel, it was enough for him to take off. And I thought that was a lie. And then about 4 weeks later, I talked to somebody saying, yeah, you know, it was with Doug Geating, and we had landed on this landing strip, and he blew out a tire. And you know what that guy did with duct tape? And I said, did he fill the tire full of all kinds of stuff? And the guy said, yeah, how'd you know that? You know, but then I did the duct tape. Cil, do you know Doug Geating?
Well, of course, he's a local character here in Talkeetna.
Okay, here's a Doug Geating story that's in one of my books, and you can ask him if it's true, because he'll think it's funny. He was Doug Geating flies from Talkeetna, and he flies up and drops off supplies for people who are climbing Mount McKinley. And you can't climb Mount McKinley just without the supplies. And so every couple of days, the plane will come up and will drop supplies. And one Christmas, he had a request for a halibut. One of the groups wanted a halibut. And so he said, fine, you know, if you want a halibut for Christmas, that's great. But the woman that was his, the usual person in the back was not there. So he had his current girlfriend, whoever she was going to help him. And He had everything in the plane set up so that, you know, when he went to the first camp, he would drop this stuff. And he went to the second camp, he would drop the other stuff. And then the third camp, he would drop off the halibut. And it's the middle of the winter, so they're not using any kind of parachutes or anything, because whatever he drops just falls into the snow and the snow stops it. So he gets to the first, actually he had the halibut in the front. And so as he is coming into the first area, he turns around and yells at the woman back there and he says, halibut. And she thought he said all of it. So what happens is here he's flying over and these guys this woman is pushing out everything in the back of this plane. And it's just raining supplies on this camp, and it knocked out their tent. A couple of guys were playing chess, and a box fell right onto the chest. All of these people start scattering, and he turns the plane around to come back to see what kind of damage there is. And he sees all of these people running away because they think he's coming back in for a second drop. So ask him if that is true.
Well, I will. That's a good story. Thanks, Steve.
Can I ask who Annabella is?
Annabella?
Actually, it's Christina Shimazaki, and I am Carl Douglas Nielsen's daughter.
Well, hello and welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad I was able to figure out how to get in.
Annabella, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
I almost didn't let you in, but I'm so glad that I
Well,
did.
me too.
Yeah,
Sorry, it's my
to
daughter's
go.
name, Annabella. I'm Christina. It just showed up as Annabella. I'll have to change that. So thank you for letting me in.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Anything that you'd like to step in here and add, especially talking about your dad?
Oh, make it true, Christina.
Well,
And be gentle.
my dad's pretty exceptional. It's been a really interesting life growing up with a dad like mine, from being a neurosurgeon to being a prolific author. And it's a lot of fun. As interesting as his books are, he is more interesting as a person. So he's quite a character and a great dad. So that's my thoughts.
Okay, well, thank you for joining. Tell us your name again. I missed it.
My name is Christina, and my last name is Shimazaki.
Oh, okay.
Let's hear anybody say that 3 times fast.
Yes, my husband is Japanese.
All right. Well, hey, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate that. That is great. Robin Barefield has joined us. She been here earlier, but she lives out in Kodiak, and the mail plane had just arrived, and so she had to come a little bit late. But she is here, and we want to hear from her about her character. Robin, go ahead.
Yep, not much happens in my area of the world except all at the same time. But anyway, I came as my character, one of the main characters in my novels, Jane Marcus. And Jane.
She's breaking up, Robin.
Yeah, Kodiak strikes again.
Yeah, Robin was afraid that the service there might be, it's a bad time afternoon for her, but that is her character, Jane.
Scientist. She's the fisheries biologist. She also can't leave a mystery alone. She finds builders of Qeqe, deal with the elements, wild and trying to down. And that is, I am now, Jane has care and I have light color there, and she don't.
Robin, thank you. I wish we could hear you better.
But I did enjoy your translation back and forth of Eskimo. So way to go.
Yeah, I find Robin's monthly newsletters interesting, is because being an historian, what I do is I have to go back and I have to look at all of the old criminal files. So I'm just looking at files. And then Robin comes out and she talks about, puts flesh on some of that stuff, and you read it and go, oh, these people are really bad people. I mean, you know, we got some really, really bad people. My wife used to be a probation officer. She used to tell me about some of the people she had as clients. And they're really bad people, but if you're someone like me who has absolutely no link to the police, to law enforcement, or the courts, it's almost entertaining. And then you get Robin come through and she says, well, let me tell you what this guy really did. And it's like reading a Marianne Holt story. You can't go to sleep at night without worrying about what's going on outside the window there.
I have a question for Abner.
Of course.
Can Abner tell us one of his stories? I love your, what is that called?
You mean the head?
No, the thing you drank from.
The gourd?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. This is an African gold mug.
I love it.
It's actually a kind of a calabash where we drink African beer from. Mostly it will be people in my attire who are actually represent the judges in courts. So he is actually he who executes judgment in court. So what I can tell you, mostly, like for instance, the hat represents the judgment. It also represents the peacemaker. As you can see, it's kind of from above, and then and it just spreads. So it actually a peacemaker for the society.
That's great. By the way, Jen just asked a question, and I thought everybody would like to think about an answer. She asked, do authors decide what genre to write, or is it something that just unfolds as you were building the story in your head or through writing?
I don't have the slightest idea. Sometimes the story just arrives completely. It just arrives complete, and it's kind of like, I've got to get to the computer to write it out because it's perfect. And other times it's just, I mean, I've got stuff that's sitting on my computer that's been sitting there for years. And I keep looking and saying, it's a great start, it's a great idea, but it just died. You know, so I wish I had a good answer for that. How about the rest of you? Do the ideas just arrive and they're complete, or do you slug it out?
I can say that with my first book, I wrote it the only way I really knew how to write it, and that was in chronological order. And I started with practically the beginning of time and then came up to the current days. And of course, I got rejection, but 3 of the kind publishers that rejected me said that my book needed structural editing, and I didn't even know what that was. So I hired a lady that said she could do structural editing, and all she did was move some paragraphs around, and then it was all good. So, you know, I can just tell you that if I was writing that book today, it would be a different book. I've learned so much in the writing of the next 2 books. And I think that that's probably true of all of us.
Well, her question was, did you decide what genre you want to write? Also, that was her question. And I will answer that as no, I did not. I literally thought I was going to write a mystery. Ask Steve Levi what I write, because it's not a mystery anymore.
Hell out of you.
Careful now.
What I do for my writing, what I do is I try to find something that I have never seen anybody else do. And then I try to shape it from there. And I have had a terrible time for years dealing with the large publishers, because in mystery, they want a murder, and I don't kill people. So I'd send them in and they would say, well, you know, it's a good story, but there are no murders, you know, and we need a murder, and we need it as close to the front as possible. you know, and then I would do something like that. And I just am not into murders. I'm not into horror. I'm not into that. I'm into, you know, impossible crimes. You know, and like I said before, you know, and I write all kinds of different subjects, but history is a lot of fun for me because the documents are there and you get to put them together. But the minute that you start getting into fiction, the world's your oyster.
Well, my creator did pick her genre because she was always a big fan of fantasy and sci-fi. And she also had all this wilderness experience living in Alaska, so she relived it through me, Rahlys, in her novels. And the idea for the whole series came from the idea that the glaciers were retreating in Alaska, and there have been things like old airplane crashes that have been showing up in retreating glacier ice. And I thought it would be she came up with the concept that there would be a crystal from another world that had been embedded in ice for centuries and would finally be revealed, uncovered by the melting of the glacier. And it just, once it got gone, it fed itself.
I think for me, sometimes it depends.
Go ahead, Mary.
I think for me, sometimes it depends. Like sometimes if I'm writing a short story, or when the idea comes, I'd be like, oh yeah, this would make a great fantasy book, or maybe this should be nonfiction, something like that. Other times I have to kind of play around with it and see what would work best. Like the series I'm writing right now, when I was first starting writing it, I did try putting it kind of in a fantasy setting for like 2 chapters, and it's like, it doesn't fit. So sometimes I have to play around and stick my world in different genres before I figure out which one fits the best.
I'm not smart enough to do genres all that much. I grew up reading a lot of good stuff, and it was about heroes and all that. And I always kind of thought about them in probably hyperbole a bit, but nevertheless something near reality. And one thing that happened to me, I went as a freshman to Stanford University from a hick town. And I was so backward that I did not know that one applied to more than one university. So the only place I applied to was Stanford. And then it seemed like no big deal. I got in. Well, when I got there, was an eye-opener. The biggest eye-opener, the thing that kind of opened the world to me, was their class, The History of World Civilizations. And I absolutely loved the class. It was full of great stories, great information. And I still can see chapters in that book and some of the slides in my mind that were presented to me. And so I decided I want to write about that sort of thing. And one of the things I don't do is I don't make a plan of a book. I've got a book pretty much in my mind. I know what the beginning and the end are. I just have to fill in all that stuff in the middle. And so I just sit down and I'll do a little research, and lo and behold, up will pop a bit of serendipity, and that'll give me how to finish the rest of this chapter. But I don't know what the next chapter is going to be about, other than I have to get my characters from this place to that. Right now I'm going from Mombasa to Calicut, India. Well, I could just say they got on a boat and they went, but it wouldn't be much of a book if I did that. So I got to throw in a little history and a little bit of pirate attacks and a few things like that. And actually, in this book that I'm writing, I actually have a most prosaic but wonderful love affair between a husband and a wife. And that is the leitmotif throughout the rest of the book. And I really enjoyed the little things that can tell how robust their relationship is without violating any of Evan's rules. That made it so that I could make this character, his name is Anika, a really exciting girl, and she's still just a girl, really, for the trip. All of the old hardened sailors love her, and she contributes because she's full brains. She's kind of a Mary Flint of that age. Anyway, it is easy to picture a Mary Flint or I've met some real hard characters. I was in the Navy. I worked in the sawmills and the forests, and I worked in a slaughterhouse. So I got to see a lot of pretty nasty stuff and meet a lot of nasty characters, and they fall in there someplace too. Finally, one last comment. My medical training was the fodder for a great many stories. I trained in neurosurgery at Parkland Hospital. This is the old Parkland Hospital in Dallas, Texas. It was a wild and woolly time, and the residents were basically cowboys. We went in and took care of everything with very little supervision, and we just operated and learned how to cut and sew. But we learned all kinds of really funny stuff about how people named their children and how the obstetricians conned the little girls into naming them things that they never would be. Just let me ask you a question. Are any of you familiar with Lloyd Davis? Well, he was Ronald Reagan's wife's father, and he was extraordinarily unpopular in Chicago. So the residents there, when they got a chance, got the little girls to name their new babies Lloyd Davis, Jones or Smith or Peterson or what have you. And so at the time that I passed through there were just tens of thousands of Lloyd Davis this and Lloyd Davis that. Well, that's the kind of stuff that went on where I trained. And when we were not flopping on the floor to sleep in exhaustion, we were laughing about some of the stuff that the people did. For example, we had to flop on the floor because the patients and their families stole all the furniture, and the county finally gave up. Anyway, those are the kind of things that came to my genre, which I guess is action adventure and historical fiction. But these are stories where real people do real stuff, and some of it, as my wife would say, is a bit much, especially Sybil. She thinks all of that's hyperbole. I tell her it could be. Sybil's pretty smart. Anyway, that's how I get through to mine.
I have a couple of questions here, guys, if you're ready, from people.
Go ahead.
One asks, if Steve would make a podcast, one of the chapters of his book, what chapter would that be?
The next book I'm working on, of course. I'm always working on a new idea. I'm always getting stalled. I'm just working on an idea now where somebody has been digging into the roof of a church. And it's something I've never seen before or heard of before. And so now I've got the guy digging into the church, but now I've got to figure out why he's getting into the church. So if I'm doing a podcast, I'd do a podcast on the next story that I'm doing, because it is the best that I've ever done. Because every time I write a book, every time I write a story, I'm a lot better than I was the last book in short stories. I'm sure everybody is the same way. What happens is I take a look at stuff that I did even 2 years ago, and I'm going, boy, this stuff is terrible. You know, I see paragraphs that never should have been. I see sentences that should have been paragraphs. I see bad, questions that are just, I mean, it's just, let's just put it this way. The next thing I do is the best thing I'm going to do, is because I've learned so much and all of the mistakes that I've made and everything else. So if I was going to do a podcast, what I would do it is on the next short story that I actually finish, because that's the best that I'm doing. That's the best that I can do, is the next story that comes out.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Before Mary Ann, before we go to the next question, I want to remind everyone that's members of the Readers and Writers Book Club, when you received the invitation to this meeting, you also had the opportunity to vote on the author that has the most or the best costume. And so exercise that vote, because Jan Rodriguez, who administers that for us, has a lottery going. Your name will go in the lottery if you cast a vote, and then you'll receive a gift certificate of $25 for casting your vote for the most unusual, best, whatever you think it is, costume of one of these authors. And before, Mary Ann, before we get to the next question too, I'd like to just ask Christina a question about her dad. Christina, I
Yes.
suspect you have read some of your father's works. Which one of his works do you consider to be your favorite?
Well, I really liked, is it the Gog and Magog, right, Dad? Is it that one? That one has always stuck with me. So I am not a writer. I did not get that talent. And I'm very impressed as I'm sitting here listening to you all speak, how just the creativity. My son is a writer. And so he has got some of his grandfather's genes, and he's a prolific writer. But my father, in reading that book, I was really impressed and surprised at some of the things that I read. But it will always stick with me about that story was it must have been the last few lines of that story. And I just remember they had vanquished terrorism in the story, and they had stopped a plot from destroying the earth or the world or whatever it was at the end. And then finally there were two men sitting together, looking at each other and quietly, kind of under their breath, preparing for the next act of terrorism. So it always stuck with me, and it kind of rang true in our world. But I don't know, it's been one of my favorite books that I've read. So yeah, and I really enjoy reading, but I've enjoyed that one.
Christina, thank you. I think that if we took a vote among the authors here, which I think every author here has read Gog and Magog, I think that we would all agree with you, at least very strong, that that's our favorite too. However, I like Sybil. But,
I was going to say the Sybil series, I want that series. I like Gog and Magog, but I really like Sybil. Now can I ask
Sybil's difficult because there's 12 books. So get yourself to a nice rocking chair and spend the pandemic.
I'd be happy to, really and truly, you hooked me on the first little bit that you put out on Readers and Writers Book Club. It was great.
Christina.
Wait till she just gets going.
Shona, James. What is that?
I beg your pardon, Mary.
In the comments, you put Okule Shona, Nshona. What is that?
Jonah, it's actually somebody's name who wanted to join the conversation.
Got it. Okay.
Yes, so I decided to mention him. But I was going to say to Christina that it's fine not to be a writer, but become a reader. That's the most important one.
Thank you. I appreciate that. When I'm listening to you all, I'm thinking, wow, sounds like I've missed something in my life by reading, or by writing, but by the reading now,
not at all.
I'm gaining a lot of the benefits of all of your writing. So thank you.
Your son
Flint
and your
needs to tell you a
father are
little story
your
about
guardian
Steve.
angels.
Carl, I'm going to come back to you in just a second. We'll let Marianne see if there's anything else out there on the.
Okay.
There's just,
But before we come back to Carl, I see that Vera's in the background there. Is there a way that we could meet her since we've already met your daughter? We could meet
Oh.
her too, if she could get the picture. Anyway, go ahead while they're arranging that, Marianne.
yeah, darling Grace Miller, who I'm so glad to see got here, she said she could see us. We got technical issues with Facebook. I think everyone might right now when they're changed over to the platform that they're changing to. But she said she can see us, but our words are echoing and running together. Kind of sounds like Kodiak. And we have another question, which is Ron asks, how do you select the names of your characters? And hello, Vera. Is that right?
Oh, you're talking?
No,
No. who?
no, just I. Say hi.
There's
Hi.
Vera. Hey, welcome, Vera. Let's hear from you.
It's nice to hear from you all. Interesting people. I was going to tell you the last book I read, we call him Doug. You know, it's Carl, but I only know him by Doug. Anyway, was the 15th Caliphate. And I didn't want to read it because I thought it was going to be too brutal and too different. Yeah, warlike. But boy, I really learned a lot of questions that I had answered. And each of the chapters were just really interesting and answered a lot of questions. I really enjoyed it. And he put a personal touch on it by having some individual people in it and told their story. So I really, anyway, that's one of my favorites.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks, Vera.
Nice to meet you.
Christine,
Nice to meet
you
you.
have
all.
special parents for sure. So, Marianne, have we
Yes.
other questions out there?
It was, how do you select the names of your characters? That's the other question.
I use Scrabble letters.
Well, what I do is when I'm looking for a new character, I want all of my characters to be as American as possible. And my father's a Holocaust refugee, and I grew up, you know, when all of the friends were children of Holocaust refugees, and they were from all these different countries, you know, from both, you know, Japan and China, as well as Europe. And so I grew up, when I was growing up, my America was not what Donald Trump's America is, you know, which is really surprising because when I went to college, you know, I was surprised at how many people there were that were of the same race. And this is in the 60s. It was really a shock for me because I was used to a really diverse neighborhood and a diverse, you know, growing up. And so when I do my characters now, I want them all to be completely different. The way I do that is I go I'm looking for Samoan name. You know, the detective calls some captain someplace, and so I go look for a Samoan name. You know, and the next time maybe it's a Japanese name, but I try to be different all the time. So it's not like I can go out and just predict what it is.
Well, I tend to go looking for unique, and boy, I bet Steve understands that, huh? When I named the bad guys, as it were, the demons, I went looking for a unique word that matched who they were. So Iconoclast is simple, but Authormasterminds and several of the others are all archaic names for a word. So one is an archaic name for dark or liar or spy. I've came up with all of those from just finding the archaic definition and names.
I didn't know that. That's interesting, Marianne. Thank you. Any other author has a comment about that?
Yeah, I've got a comment. I'll be quick. I grew up with a lot of characters, really funny people, and I throw their names in, although I mix, mingle, and integrate, so you can't particularly identify them. And then actually, I have two friends that appear in every one of my books by name, but as different characters, and they all get they each get a big laugh about that. I'll give you anybody a book that can find the name of either of those two guys in any one of my books. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing is, I try to be as accurate as possible. And one thing I've learned is that names differed in different centuries, certainly in different countries. So I always go to my side brain, the internet, and Google it, and I find out a set of names, and I mix and mingle those until I've got an accurate 17th century Japanese shipping tycoon or a Malayan pirate. And in fact, I looked up the name of a Chinese woman pirate, one of the greatest admirals of all time. She had 1,800 ships, made an absolute fortune in the billions of dollars in the days when $100 was a lot. Now, not even $1 billion is a lot, apparently, because we got whatever it is, $28 trillion worth of national debt. Anyway, it works really well for me, and I want someone to say, oh, no, that's a modern Japanese name. Well, I'd be humiliated to have somebody do that. So I try to be really careful. So I'm kind of the opposite of all these real creative people. I'm just a worker bee.
Okay, thanks, Carl. Any other comment there?
Oh, yes. For me, actually, Ron, one thing, most of my characters are people I've met before. So don't be surprised when you see your name in my next book.
Before we move on, we got to have you say your last name, and we need to have you say it slow and say it 2 or 3 times, because there's not anyone here that can say it.
You want me to do that now?
Yes, go ahead.
So I am James Qeqe. Qeqe. That's what you're looking for. Qeqe.
Tell them about the cliques, James. Who talks in cliques?
What's
Who
that called?
talks in cliques? Yeah, what language is used? Cliques.
Xhosa. It's
How do you spell?
It's Xhosa. That's Xhosa. Xhosa.
And I defy anybody to learn that language that James is speaking, because I don't think you can get that click out. I have some friends. They're real African Americans. They just happen to be of the Caucasian tribe, but they can kid each other in Xhosa. And let me tell you, you got to be real smart or real fluent as a native, or you can't do it.
Okay, yeah, well, thanks. Okay, anything else, Marianne, that we should bring up? Anything that authors would like to end today with? We've had fun here.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for being here. And we will be back next month. And we hope there'll be more people here. And we'll have another interesting discussion.
Yep. What he said.
All right. Well, I sure, again, it's been fun. And this will be recorded. It'll stay on the Readers and Writers Book Club. And then also it'll go on the Readers and Writers YouTube channel. So it'll stay there. And any of you authors want to refer people to it, why, feel free to do so. So I guess we just end this by saying thanks for being here, and we'll see you next month. But in the meantime, keep in touch.